Okay, but the thing about DCM is it knows how to remediate what you tell it how to remediate. So if you say, I want to add these 8 users, it'll add those 8 users. But for the most part, it doesn't care about the rest of the system. And it's non-trivial to define what you're looking at. And I mean, it's pretty close to trivial. If I want to define a user, I can do it in about 4 lines of text. Easy. Short lines of text. But if I wanted to define the 80 users that are default on a Linux box, that's 320 lines of text. It's going to be different. I don't want to do all that. So at some point, I also want to be able to look at a machine and say, right now, this is the way I want it to look. If anything changes, let me know. I don't even care what it is, but we'll look at these places. Look in this directory, this directory, and this directory. And if anything changes there, I want to be alerted. So, and that's kind of these things, our integrity monitoring. We want delta detection. You know, we're going to notice changes. We'll report on changes. But delta detection sounds so much cooler. It might have more syllables, I'm not sure. We want much wider monitoring. For instance, I may only care if there are 6 or 8 given users or 1 piece of software on a server, but I am definitely going to want to know if all of a sudden an IRC server starts on that server. I know because I got alerted on that. We had a production web server breached, and the first thing the bad guys did was start up an IRC server right on it so they could then coordinate the attack on the rest of our machines. Cool. Well, I had an integrity monitoring system in place, so I knew with about 5 minutes after that system started up, we were in looking at what they were doing. And they were getting very frustrated as we fixed things around them. We also want to have something that collects your log files and looks at them. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. This is a really big one, a searchable history. And these are the 2 I like using. Okay, that's a lie. One of these 2 I like using. There is one that will remain unnamed that's very expensive and hard to set up. And then there's this one from Trend that won't cost you anything. It's an open source thing. And I have a bias towards that, but I'll tell you more about that later. That does everything the other one does and is a lot easier to use. So, and I've got a couple of pictures from that. So I'm going to talk about OSSEC. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right because I've never actually heard anyone say it. I've only emailed with the guys who work on this. These are the big things it looks at. And when you're configuring it, you say, I want you to look at the registry on Windows machines. You say, I want you to look at these specific directories on Unix boxes. Look for open ports, open network connections. On important files, it keeps track of the checksums and the last modified times. And the neat thing about that is, if you look at the checksum of a file and the size of a file, if you have a good checksumming system, no changes can be made to that file without disrupting either the checksum or the size. One of the 2. Usually it'll get them both. But if either of those things changes, you know you got to change. You've got an alteration in that file. OSSEC doesn't always know what changed. But it doesn't always matter what changed, because if the password database just changed on a machine that nobody can log into, I don't care what it changed to. I just know that I have to hit the red alarm button, and the klaxons will go off, and the security guys are going to make work for me. So, and OSSEC is a really kind of a neat client-server system because it doesn't keep many rules on the client. It's constantly asking the server what its rules are. So if somebody breaches a client, even if they figure out that OSSEC is running, they don't necessarily know what OSSEC is checking for, which is neat. It's how we caught the guys with the IRC server. Well, I shouldn't say we caught them. We watched them messing around with it, and then we couldn't get anybody in law enforcement to pay any attention. They didn't care, so we just locked them out. But I guess we interrupted them from doing anything worse. But this is part of this is half of the web interface for OSSEC. It is horribly named the OSSEC WUI, the web UI, and I don't know what these guys are thinking, but I mean I know what web UI, but really they call it WUI, and it allowed us to arbitrarily search from given dates and times across all the machines or just some of them. So when we realized something had gone wrong, we could go back and see when that had started. We actually had a machine that all of a sudden showed up with a rootkit, and it really scared us. So we went crawling back through 6 weeks of history, because that was all we had. And with that, we could determine there had been no breaches anywhere. And then we finally found out where the rootkit came from. Someone had backed up an archive of a breached server off of their workstation because they were leaving the company, and they put it on the development server because one of the other guys wanted to look at it. So the rootkit was actually hidden in essentially a zip file in a shared directory. It was of no danger, but we found it anyway. So here we go. What did OSSEC find in that time? Yeah, our swap plugin failed on that machine. I used to have this really neat chart in the documentation that I wrote up for this that had, get an alert. It had a yes and a, do you need to do something with this alert? Yes. Do you need to ever do anything with it again? No. And then there was a create and ignore rule, which was the same thing if you didn't need to do anything with the alert. We created an ignore rule for that. But you'll see this thing, this is the strength of an integrity monitoring system over a DCM system. Desired configuration management forces things to look the way you want. Integrity monitoring can tell you when something looks odd. It hasn't seen this before, and it knows that if it sees a fail in this log file, somebody probably wants to know about it. And unless we're told differently, we assume somebody does. Make sense? Yeah? All right. Now, why do I keep saying, why all this open source? Well, part of it is self-preservation. I would like you to pay for expertise, not product, and I am expertise. If I were product, I would tell you how wonderful the licensed versions of this software like OSSEC and Puppet are, and certainly you can buy them from the company. But I like this model a lot. Some of these tools are incredibly powerful, and it's amazing what the open source tools can do for you. They won't always do everything that commercial tools will do. But this enough eyeballs, all problems are shallow. That keeps getting ascribed to different open source guys, be it Randall Schwartz, or it's kind of a paraphrase of something Linus Torvalds said. But it really is, if you get enough people looking at a problem, generally you can get a solution to it. And while I was rolling out OSSEC, in the space of 2 weeks, I found a bug and mentioned it to a guy who was working on the core product, and then he just fixed it. And all of a sudden it worked beautifully. Wow. There was no formal procedure for filing bugs. I didn't have to sit on a bunch of calls. It was really quite amazing. But the big one is license management in the cloud. How many people spend way too much time counting how many licenses of Office they have? Yeah, I hate that. Oh boy, I never have to pay licenses for Google Docs. When you've got people spinning stuff up willy-nilly, if you can eliminate the license management, it's a lot easier. And both Puppet and OSSEC can be relatively easily configured so that when a new node is created in either the public or maybe even a private cloud, it just hooks into the existing systems. It comes up, it registers with the OSSEC server, it grabs its rules. Awesome. I'm monitored from the instant I started. There we go. And this is, I got to poke fun specifically at MATLAB because they use a phrase that I believe is an abomination of the English language, and that is one concurrent license. I told him, my 10-year-old has an issue with that. So he said, concurrent, that means when two things happen at once. I said, yes. He said, how can you have one concurrent anything? I don't know, but I know it's very expensive. Their one concurrent license is one person can use software at once, but you can put it on a server. Oh, well, that was expensive. But now these guys, the open source RStudio guys, hey, you want to just throw it on some servers? Okay, it's free. You want to call us and get help? It's $1,000 a user. Oh, okay, easy enough. So until you actually need help, you don't need to pay anything. So you can play around with stuff. And that's the same thing with OSSEC. You may very well spin up OSSEC, spend a couple of weeks on it, realize this doesn't do what we need. Maybe Tripwire does. You might end up changing products.